Hello and welcome to another Salesforce Ben LinkedIn Live. My name is Ben McCarthy, the founder of Salesforce Ben, and I'm going to be your host for today. And today we're going to be learning about all the different integration options you can have on Salesforce. And I think it's safe to say that Salesforce is at its most powerful when it's integrated with other systems. We've all seen the diagram of the Customer 360 with Sales Cloud, Service Cloud, all these different systems to engage and connect with your customers on different channels. But unless you actually have proprietary data and data from other systems coming into Salesforce, it's very unlikely you can reach that Customer 360, the kind of pinnacle of Salesforce. So I'm very happy to introduce Dave today from Celigo, who is one of our partners. Hello, Dave.
Hey, everybody. Hey, Ben.
Good to see you. Thank you very much for joining us today. And Dave is going to take us through the presentation, which compares different integration solutions, which hopefully leads you to decide what is best for yourself. I'm going to hop off now, but we will be having a Q&A at the end of the session. So if you've got any questions for Dave or myself, feel free to pop them in the chat throughout the session, and we'll try and get around to as many as we can at the end. Dave, over to you.
All right. Thanks, Ben. So as Ben said, my name is Dave Wallen. I'm the Director of Product Marketing at Celigo. I have worked for a variety of platform and SaaS companies. And I've also spent time leading marketing for systems integrations and services firms. And in all that time, deployment or implementation of my software or platform software was never the big challenge. The problem was always involved integrations. One product I worked for, a lot of you might be familiar with spanning backup. And in spanning backup, our whole design was to make it super easy to integrate with Salesforce and as well as Microsoft 365 and G Suite. But that's not always the case, that things are plug and play that way. And certainly when it comes to specific areas of data and automating business processes across systems, that simplicity is hard to match. So you need to find tools to help you do that. So what we're going to go through today is how today's integration challenge is very different than what we saw in the past. What bad things happen when your integration solution doesn't scale. And then we're going to look at kind of the major options you have, which are custom code, vendor-provided native integrations, IPass, and what Forrester calls advanced IPass, kind of a different version of that. And as we said, we've got time for Q&A at the end. So let's just get into it. This is an example of a very simple and very common business process. We've got a quote to cash. We've got capture the lead, develop that into an opportunity, issue a quote, issue a contract, customer signs a contract, we have an order that we bill them, we fulfill that order, we recognize that revenue, and in this case we're going to say, hey, Salesforce and our ERP is NetSuite, and it looks like it just requires a simple integration between Salesforce and NetSuite, but things are rarely that simple, right? First of all, there are tons of sub-processes that are involved in a complex business process like quote to cash. And in some cases, we may do everything on Salesforce, we may do everything on NetSuite, and we'll just configure those things, but that very rarely happens. Usually people want to, usually the functionality in the core system either isn't there, doesn't meet your needs, or the time and effort to configure that process in a module of Salesforce or NetSuite or whatever ERP we're talking about is just more work, time, effort, and cost than to buy or and integrate to an outside tool. And a lot of cases, in the past, when IT kind of controlled all buying, one of the primary drivers was, hey, is this thing going to integrate? Can we easily integrate this? But now, a lot of cases, most cases, business teams will go out and find a best of breed SaaS solutions that meets their needs, that fits their budget, and then it becomes a system that needs to be integrated. And really, complex business processes span multiple systems, right? As more and more applications are built, it's not just the CRM and the ERP as part of quote to cash, right? You're going to do marketing automation. Those leads are going to come from somewhere. They're going to come from your website. They're going to be processed through maybe a HubSpot. If you're a SaaS company like I am, so I kind of think that way, right? We've got customer success. So we've got our Zendesk tools. We've got our Gainsight tools to help people through the onboarding process. If you're a services firm that has to hire staff to staff projects, then you're going to need significant integration with your HR processes. And everybody is trying to get better and smarter about their business information and their business intelligence. So people have data warehousing tools. They've got their analytics tools on top of those data warehouses, and all of this has to come together. And if they're not integrated properly, Ben used the example of Customer 360, but in all these cases, if the data is not in the system, and for certainly Salesforce users, a system of record tends to be Salesforce, or sometimes it's your ERP if finance has a bigger say in what's going on. But in either case, that data has to get to that system of record or into a separate data warehouse where it's a system of record for the company to have a single version of the truth for their business intelligence and their data, as well as fast and accurate data to make those sorts of decisions. And the more and more you go, the bigger you get, the integration gets more and more complex. And some data kind of backing all of this up. G2 did a survey. They found that 40% of enterprise technology spending is outside of IT. And when they say enterprise technology spending, that's going to include security. That's going to include administration. If you're a Microsoft shop, that's going to be your Active Directory in your Teams. If you're a more of a SaaS-based shop, hey, you've got Slack and your collaboration tools. All of these things count as part of that. So when you think about who's making decision around business systems, it's business units. So they're picking the best of breed tool for them, not necessarily the tool that's going to integrate best with those other tools. And typical mid-market company, depending on the survey, you'll see sometimes they'll say 40 is the average number of SAP staff. Sometimes it's 80. Salesforce did their annual state of integration, and it was over 120. And in that same report, that state of integration, they found that only 29% of all of these applications are integrated. So really, it demonstrates why it's incumbent to have an integration strategy. And an integration strategy has to scale because, as we said, it's going to get bigger and bigger. That problem gets larger as more applications are added. And when systems are connected, the processes that span them are compromised. Right now, people are performing parts of that process manually, whether they are actually doing work that's involved in part of it and it's not automated. But even worse is we've created a manual process that is taking data from one system, either keying it in or more likely downloading something in a spreadsheet, massaging it somewhat, and then uploading it into another SaaS system. And that's where that leads directly to that poor quality usability of data, right? When you give people repetitive processes that are not interesting and boring, that are just moving data, they're going to make mistakes. And that means that data is bad, as well as being slow and as well as wasting people's time. When you've got all of these systems, each has their own security and authentication methods, and there's no central management over how this data is flowing through all of these systems. There's the opportunity for compromise is there, and meeting compliance requirements and meeting data privacy requirements is so important and very difficult to do if you don't have a scalable integration solution. And as business teams discover that these SaaS solutions they've invested in need to be integrated, maybe need integrated to one or two, to multiple systems to really get the value that they're looking for to get that process truly automated, that the number of integration projects that companies need to do continues to grow, and these growing integration backlogs. We hear from IT leaders all the time that this is backlogs never go away, but they're getting bigger and bigger and accelerating. And all of this kind of results in this failure to realize the full value of the investment in their tech stack, both the individual, and as senior leadership and senior business leadership and technology leadership is really looking at the investments they've made over the past few years. Since 2020, the numbers of SaaS applications has exploded. That decentralized decision making has continued to accelerate. And now people are, we've reached the economic point where people are saying, okay, let's take a real look at what we bought, what we're spending, and are we getting the value out of that? And without integration, you're not getting that value. And even a kind of a small, silly thing, but when we're SaaS people, we really think about it, is not only are we not getting the investment back on a macro level, but on a simple number of subscriptions, we find customers having to have additional subscriptions to multiple SaaS applications just for people to have access rights to pull data out and put data in, or just to get visibility into that next system. So integration costs money. Not there's opportunity costs and there's direct costs that having a poor integration solution results in. So let's look at some of these options. And the first one, and kind of the oldest option, the option that's always been there, is coded point-to-point integrations. It's funny, on a benefit side, it has the smallest barrier to entry, but it's also the most unlimited, biggest can do anything solution, right? So the smallest company can hire somebody, usually an outsourced or a partner, to build an integration from one system to another. On the other side, that unlimited extensibility, right? If you have a large development team, developers can customize integrations to meet virtually any business or technology requirement, given the time, given the money, right? So, and that's really where those challenges come in, is time and money. Point to point, coded integrations have the longest and the most time intensive option for integration, and they're the most expensive option for integration. The in-house development resources are expensive to hire and retain. Organizations need to have enough demand to maintain a development team and give them interesting business, because developers can get other jobs in other places at a lot more money. We're going to actually talk about that a little bit. And hiring outside resources, doesn't require commitment, but those hourly rates for those skilled developers are very high. And depending on the skill staff of your IT group, you still need additional costs for business analysts, for overall architecture design and project management, depending on how complex that project is and how much of it needs to be outsourced. And without a centralized system, we talked about that enforcement of integration policies and meeting those compliance requirements, you may or may not have that, right? Because you still don't have central way to manage and govern all of those data policies. And we mean by continuity, right? Again, developer turnover is very high, and without proper documentation, which is extremely rare outside large enterprises who have robust development tool sets, or the top SIs. Even really good SIs will give you, they'll give you documentation, but generally it's not the kind of tools that's going to help you, that if that integration breaks later, and integrations inevitably do break down without documentation, trying to figure out how that was made, what needs to be done to maintain it, and what needs to be done to get it uptime is going to be expensive and also result in downtime. Endpoint management is another thing. Modern APIs are great, but when the API changes, that integration will break. And actually, it's not that anything went wrong with the code. It's just the API changes. So what it's calling is different, and the integration no longer works. And in that case, it's the same thing. A developer's going to have to come in, figure out what happened, read the endpoint documentation from that SaaS vendor, from that endpoint, and manage all of those. So, all in all, there's a very high total cost of ownership. Again, the implementation costs, the cost of creating these, and that's ongoing, right? Because there's create time, there's the time and expense in creating an integration, but over the life cycle of an integration, most of the time is spent modifying as business needs change, and error management, because errors happen, again, having nothing to do with the code. Changes, there are data errors, there's downtime errors, there are API limits errors, all these things that have to be troubleshoot, resolved, so that the business can continue to move forward. And you don't get any of that with coded point-to-point integrations. So that was the kind of original de facto way of integrating. Today, in kind of the cloud world, with so many APIs available, and the drive for so many companies needing those integrations between, certainly those major SaaS apps and those major use cases between all of those, what we see more so, and especially in the Salesforce world, is vendor native integrations being kind of the de facto. This is the thing we're probably going to go with. They are designed for Salesforce admins to be able to configure the integrations themselves, get things up and going. As long as they understand, the documentation, they're generally very fast and easy to configure, and they are the least expensive way to integrate two applications. And the problem with these come on two sides. One is they tend to be very limited functionality, and they address only the most common use cases, only the most common objects. And they often provide limited or no ability for customization. So if your requirements are different than the native integration or beyond the native integration, there's generally no option to modify that. And if there is, it's still to the extent that they allow you. The other fact is they are decentralized. So, just like, just like we saw in the custom integrations, even though they don't require that same level of development upkeep, you still have multiple applications, multiple integrations, multiple authentication methods, and across the business, IT doesn't have any way of managing compliance and data security. So it's difficult to manage at scale from a compliance point of view. But again, as we talked about before, is the lifetime cost of an integration is not necessarily the create time, which in this case is going to be free. It is that error management support. You know, if you've got an individual who's really dedicated to that SaaS app, understands all of those error codes, that's great. But generally, things are going to go wrong. There's going to be a data error. There's going to be an error code thrown back. Now IT has to come in, troubleshoot that, figure out what the issue is, and then if it's a data error, modify that data. And they are not going to be an expert at 40, 50, 60 SaaS applications. So there's going to be downtime. There's going to be business interruption with vendor provided integration. So it's great in theory and it's fine if you're just connecting two apps. But once you get past, and once that business process goes across multiple applications, and now IT has to manage a number of these things, it becomes very difficult to scale. And that's where we've seen IPass, and IPass has grown in popularity since 2020. We worked with Forrester, and they did a survey in late 2020, kind of after all the dust cleared and after people had really done that rapid migration to the cloud and purchased a lot of SaaS applications that were integrated in different ways and forms, whether manually or automated, and kind of got some feedback of what who's thinking of what integration tools they're using and what who was using an IPass. We did with them a similar study just this past summer, and the really interesting thing was the massive growth in the adoption of IPass, which was up 118%. And here's where the current state is. And so half of the companies that we surveyed, and we surveyed mid-market enterprises, IT leaders, and business leaders, half were IPass users, had made that investment and were getting things up and going or using it. Of those that weren't, the vast majority are planning to adopt and in the evaluation stage. So what was a unusual, new, interesting, integration option is now becoming a much more of a standard across certainly mid-market and above. And IPass has a tremendous number of advantages, and we kind of look at first as the traditional IPass, and traditional IPass is designed to improve the speed and productivity of development teams in building integrations and automating processes. Most Salesforce customers are familiar with MuleSoft. MuleSoft is a traditional IPass, right? It facilitates, the integration of applications, systems, or really any data source across your organization, with an emphasis on data connectivity and data consistency. Your development team has now a centralized hub, right, for creating applications faster and better, for managing those applications, and data transformations, data mappings, and having repeatability and standardization of integration. So the development teams can accelerate and centralize their business process automation, and developers have what they need. So you do get much greater time to value compared with custom applications, right? Integration projects to be completed in days versus weeks or months for coded integrations. You get that governance, right? Now there's a central way to make sure that IT can centralize, make sure that everything going on is meeting corporate and regulatory standards for security and privacy. There's greater agility once that integration is created, right? It can be rapidly modified. It's faster and easier to integrate new SaaS applications into the business. So as new applications are added, as business processes change, as complex business processes span more functionality, and as you want to get more data into your data warehouse for data analysis and data analysis and decision making, you've got that do that just much faster. So your total cost of ownership, right, is significantly reduced. The key number that they, across IPass is that, developer productivity is improved by 50% or more. Now, the challenges with traditional IPass is, there are high investment costs, but that's really not the primary issue for especially mid-market companies and smaller companies or larger companies that don't maintain large development teams. They are designed for developers and development teams. They require hiring and retaining technical resources. So similar, we talked about the issues with custom coding. You have similar issues there, except your developers are now much more productive. So maybe you don't need as many focused on integration, but now you've created integration specialists who have proprietary knowledge and specialized skills. So they're more expensive, harder to find, and harder to retain. And what you also don't get with the traditional IPass is collaboration with business teams, right? Business process automation, and that requires the technical staff still to create and maintain their integrations, and IT is still the contributing factor. You still have to go through business analysis. There's still a lot of back and forth. The business, just people who understand their data needs and understand their processes that need to be automated are still not the ones who are performing and creating these or managing them. It's still IT. So there's still the problems we have there. And here's, we looked at kind of integration challenges. So this is from that same survey that we did. The top issues, and kind of demonstrates why advanced IPass, and we'll talk about what advanced IPass is and how that's different than traditional IPass, but why that is catching on, because the challenges that we talked about, even with a traditional IPass, lack of qualified staff was number one. Complexity prevents changes from being made. Technology can't fix that, right? The more people and the more complexity involved in the process, the harder it is to do. So that is what it is. Although when more business users are involved in it, that simplifies the complexity, because at least there are less people being involved in the project. Implementation costs are high, yes, and inability to meet business requirements. So this, kind of when you think about the complexity and that inability to meet business requirements, that's that without it, with a traditional IPass, you're not solving the business and collaboration between business and IT to automate processes and do those sort of integrations. So that, those are things that we want to address with it. So one thing here, this is super interesting, is kind of the talent crunch. This is really when we talk about lack of qualified staff. Traditionally, traditional IPass, or certainly code to code, requires expensive and scarce IT specialists. That limits the number and reduces the scope of projects that IT can develop. And there was an article in Tech Target that said 70% of digital leaders, this was a global study of 14,000 companies, so they can't keep up with these trends because of a lack of skilled workers. On average, the team turnover is 11%, and many staff leave because, for all of the economic uncertainty we are dealing with, and certainly people are worried about that, and businesses are actually laying off people. But when we hear about these major layoffs, certainly in tech companies, those skilled developers are finding jobs in other industries very quickly. And even now, the average salary increase for developers want to switch companies, they will get 25% increase in costs in pay for switching, whereas they get an average of 3 to 5% for staying. So it's difficult to find and keep those skill sets. And then you think about the size or the number of people who are dedicated to application support. Before, when I said 40% of IT spend is done by the business, and that is really the application group. And then here's kind of a similar stat. So 7% of employees, and this is from a Gartner survey of mid-market enterprise customers, and mid-market enterprises, not enterprise class customers. 7% in general of the total employee count are dedicated to IT. 20% of that group is dedicated to application support, and that application support means implementation, deployment, help desk, troubleshooting, all those things. So what percent of that is dedicated to integrations? We don't really know, but it's a limited number of people, obviously, and this kind of demonstrates why integration backlogs are growing. But there is an opportunity, and there's a huge opportunity in the way that the workforce is done. And this is from another Gartner study. It's called the Reimagining Technology Work Survey, also mid-sized enterprises. And this is where that 7% of employees are dedicated IT staff. Yes, but 42% of employees are what Gartner calls business technologists, right? And these are the people who are not necessarily in IT, don't necessarily have an IT role, but a part of their job and by role is working with technologies. These are the most digitally adept employees. They modify and customize or configure their own analytics. They do their own process automations. They may even build solutions as part of their daily work. And a modern Salesforce admin and Salesforce power user is a perfect example of what Gartner considers a business technology. And then you got 51% of employees are technology end users. But in today, certainly even people my age, every age, if you are still working, you have a fairly significant amount of technical capability if you're working in a what we call an information worker kind of capacity. So the people that we work with every day, there's a lot of untapped potential that can help in moving the business forward in better integrating and automating business processes. So here's the kind of the differentiators that Forrester calls out to differentiate an advanced IPass from a traditional IPass. And the number one, the key is really having that user experience that's going to support the developers and make them more productive, provide capabilities for business technologists to be part of this process, to be able to create and manage integrations and even some level of functionality for end users to be part of that. So as to spread that ability to integrate and automate amongst a greater number of people, reduce IT's backlog and reduce make them less of a bottleneck in having the company move their integration forward and have a much more scalable integration solution. And another, this is, I realize this is like analyst speak. What does intelligent repeatability powered by machine learning and AI really mean? I guess it means different things for different organizations. At Celigo, we've really invested a lot of it in, certainly there's this AI assist to help people to build their integrations and offer suggestions and speed things along and help understand how what the data structures are, what the objects should be, creating drop downs, and that's really bridging the skill gap for not only making those developers faster, but so the business technologists can do 80%, create 80% of their own integrations, especially if it's two endpoints that they are very comfortable with. We've also invested a lot in error management and ongoing. So as I said before, the life cycle of a integration, create time is short, runtime is long, and error management is going to take up a lot more time and resources over time, and error handling and modifications than that development time. So we've invested our AI trained our AI to be able to identify error codes and put them into English, and put that all kind of in a way that an end user who's not even a business technologist, just somebody who understands the business process can say, okay, here's what the error is. If it's something that is system based, then there's an auto recovery system that just will let that flow, so that there's no resolution that needs to be taken. It's only if it's a data error that then now that end user has to go in and fix it. And if it's something, it's only if it's something beyond their comprehension. If they don't understand, there's common data error is this, one system puts states as a drop down and it's written out, it's New York. Another one may have a US state and they only use codes, it's NY, and somehow that New York didn't become NY, you get a data error. That's something that an end user can quickly go in and fix. So leveraging those tool sets to do that. Modern cloud architecture is another part of it. Advanced IPasses tend to be newer, or they are newer. It's actually advanced means newer. It doesn't really mean that it's necessarily more functionality than traditional IPass. But in this case, they are Metacon, so they tend to process data more effectively and faster, and therefore generally less expensively. And there's often not a need to do sizing. There may be cost involved with how much data you're moving or how much you're doing, but by using modern cloud infrastructure, be able to burst and deal with different types of issues. For instance, at Soligo, we have a lot of e-commerce customers. It was just Black Friday and Cyber Monday. We had no issues in terms of performance during that day because we were able to burst and handle everybody's, many more times of transactions than they would normally have. Advanced IPass have business process support, so that's more focused really at those developers. And because business technologists understand a business process, they need AI to provide a skill gap for them to be able to manage integrations. IT needs to manage a skill back to better understand business processes. So, modern advanced IPasses will have business process support for common use cases. They'll use them same thing the way you use machine learning and AI. Look at things over and over again. Since if you've done millions of quote to cash business process automations, you can provide best practices to developers in doing it the first time, and hopefully speeding that time to value as they're collaborating with the business to process out. And in many cases, there are pre-built integrations. Some people will call them recipes, some people call them templates. We at Sligo either call them, we have integration applications that are fully baked, or we have templates that get you 80% of the way there. But again, it's all focused on faster time to value and enabling people who are not necessarily technical developers to be able to engage, be part of integration automation, and make better use of everybody's time, everybody's resources. So what you get out of an advanced IPass really is that even faster time to value, right? You got fast time to value with a traditional IPass because your developers were 50% more productive. With advanced IPass, by injecting business technologists into the process and being part of it, the company developers are often 75% more productive because they are not dealing with a lot of the other issues that the business technologists and end users can do, and they can just focus on the more complex integrations. And as a company-wide, you are getting more and more people involved, and we've seen time to value upwards of 90% faster to get integrations up and going. So there's that improved collaboration between business and IT, which is really valuable. Again, it's going to get faster time to value. It's going to reduce the friction and slowness of trying to get business processes automated and with higher quality, because the business technologists, people who understand the process, are part of it. People understand their data needs, are part of making those mappings and defining those integrations. So the company gets greater agility and even lower total cost of value. And we say the challenge is you've got to train more people than you may have if now we're training business technologists how to use the platform. We're training some select business users, those who are going to be part of the process. But all in all, certainly the ROI in that additional training time is tremendous. So it's highly valuable. And this is from, again, more research from Forrester, by asking business and IT leaders what benefits they expect that they have gotten or expect to get from their investment in advanced IPass. They're all the things we talked about, improving process efficiency and automation capabilities, reducing the backlog, reduction of operational costs. Hey, this is why we're automating processes and getting better data for decision making there. But the interesting one also is that 31% reduction in SaaS contracts. In many cases, that pays for your investment in an integration platform as a service. You're taking money away from the giving people read writes and taking time to get visibility in systems that they don't actually use except for those things, taking that money and putting it into an IPass, so you're getting the business benefits of the IPass, and getting the investment, the funding for that just by the reduction in SaaS contracts. So that is kind of an interesting stat. And just there are other advanced IPasses out there. Obviously, it's I am biased for Celigo. It's a quick commercial. Nice. The things, I don't want to go through all this. I think the important thing for me is first is when I talked about that scalability, that capability of bursting to handle large amounts of data. So we process approximately 15 billion records every month on average. But today, and this works these past couple of weeks, Black Friday, Cyber Monday, still really high e-commerce volume. So that skyrockets for us. We'll go 25, 30, 40% higher in December and end of Thanksgiving, and we had no interruptions in service, no issues in performance in keeping up and meeting all of those requirements. Another one that to me is kind of important is down at the bottom, and that's our customers. We get great customer reviews. We measure ourselves against what our customers think of us. We are a leader in G2. We are a leader in Gartner Peer Insights, and all those things. And thing that we're particularly proud of is we were named customer choice in Gartner's Voice of the Customer for IPass. What's really cool about this is you need to be you have to be one of the IPasses covered by the Gartner Magic Quadrant. So you've got to have enterprise class functionality. And where we won for both North America and midsize enterprise, we won for both the biggest enterprises, smallest enterprises. And I didn't go through all of those nameplates. I never bothered because it's boring to most people. What's important is we have functionality and we can support the automation integration requirements of companies from very, very small to the largest company organization in the world. I did a webinar a couple of weeks ago with a customer, an e-com customer. So they did $15 million worth of business last year, and they're expecting to grow by 33% this year. It's a skincare company. They transact on Amazon. They transact on Shopify stores, just a tremendous number of transactions. And they're able to do all of that with five employees, which is crazy. But that's because they set up their basic integrations. They have a limited number. They roll through all of that, and they're able to continue in doing that. At the same time, Unilever is leveraging it across multiple business processes. So one tool that can meet so many uses and meet customer needs. And again, it's because we won this because of usability, ease of use for both technical and business users. Another thing that was often called out is we have a very predictable, transparent pricing model. So we have no consumption costs. We have no sizing. You have a certain number of endpoints and number of data flows that are defined, but within that, there's no limit on the amount of data, the number of concurrent flows that can go to a system at any given time, or the number of users. So it's really about letting as many people as possible be part of the integration and business automation process, and speed time to value and move the business forward as fast as it possibly can. So I think that's enough of me talking, Ben. I hope we have some questions.
That was great. Thank you so much, Dave. Really, really insightful. I've kind of known about IPass for a while, but never seen it, compared to the whole range of integration options. So really great to see it compared, and it clearly is a great option for a lot of companies. So questions. So we do have a few coming in, but I can see there is still a bunch of people on the webinar. So if you do have any questions for Dave, then please drop them in the chat, and we'll try and get around to as many as we can. So the first question is, how is IPass different than Flow?
That's a great question, and so we are not a Salesforce specific tool. We're platform agnostic. And when I talk to Microsoft customers, they will ask, well, how is this different from Power Automate? And when we talk to NetSuite customers, they say, how is this different from Zapier? So it really comes down to there's workflow automation. So yeah, there's a big overlap between business process automation and part of it is task driven and part of it is data driven. And there's kind of a Venn diagram where it's kind of okay, some of these things are both. In the case of specifically with Flow is a workflow automation tool, right? So yes, it does move data across. It's obviously optimized for within the Salesforce, within the Salesforce cloud. And if everything is within Salesforce, that's where you don't need an integration tool. It will do anything you need to do. It's when you're going outside the cloud and you're starting to connect to other systems. Flow is not good for that. You can connect, but there are limitations on the size of data. There are limitations on the number of concurrent flows. There are certainly API limitations. I mean, that's with anything, but it's hard to manage. And this is where I get to that hard to manage. Another difference, right? Flow is for people or Salesforce admins to create workflows and publish them to other people, but it's not a centralized tool for integration management. So it's not a data management tool. It is a task-based versus information flow, but it is when you go beyond the Salesforce cloud that those limitations will really impact. So you won't get the performance. In the right use cases, Flow is the right answer. When it's a data-driven, and especially high volume data. But I think in any case, where data management, where compliance and privacy regulations come into effect, where there's a need for central management, for error management, those sorts of things, that's where Flow doesn't, or Zapier or Power Automate, whatever your platform is, workflow automation tools are designed to better enable tasks-based automation versus database automation.
Great. Thanks so much, Dave. And we've got another question here. What does training look like on the Sligo platform? And then maybe you could speak about implementation there a bit as well.
So implementation it's a SaaS platform's up and going. Obviously, you have to learn how to create integrations. And we have a number of ways of doing that. And again, they are tailored to the individual profile of users. So for a developer, we actually have in many cases, developers can just take the online courses. We have certifications. We go level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4. And developers can often, if they're really skilled developers, that's all they need, and they're often going. Those same certifications are available to business technologists, but for that profile, we also offer what we call masterclass, which is kind of a few hours a day over 2 weeks to get someone who's not totally comfortable in messing around and figuring out a platform themselves like a developer to get to that level of functionality, to be able to create complex integrations that don't involve code and use the platforms at that level. For business users, those end users, depending on what it is they're going to be part of, we have individual opportunities. So we obviously do it. The most common is error management. So we have a special error management training just so they can understand how that works and how they can go in and enter their codes. It does, they still need to understand your endpoints, and that's really where the difference comes in, right? It's business technologists understand their endpoints in a way that they can be very, very capable right off the bat. But business users tend to kind of need something very specific. And we have ongoing office hours, which is really for developer types or business technologists to come and bring interesting use cases and work with people to do that. And and we also have our community. So training is really tailored. We've got all kinds of options, and they're tailored to individual users and what their requirements are to be able to use the platform.
Great, thanks, Dave. And actually, someone, Sheikh, I hope I've pronounced that correctly, has just said he's been diving into lots of integration systems at the moment, and he's been introduced to Sligo today, so another one to evaluate. And he's mentioned there are certifications, and I think I'm just on your sligo.com/university. Is that the right?
Yes, Sligo University. That's where you go, and
yeah, it looks like you've got 4.
Yep, 4 levels, and then there's advanced topics. And you can sign up for a trial and start to mess around right there. So, as a trial user, you have full access to Sligo University and all those resources.
Nice, great. And it's something actually we talk about a lot at Salesforce, Ben. You know, there's so many great ISVs out there who have their own university and training platforms, and it's just a great another certification to add to your CV. So, you know, you can prove to your current employer or next employer that you're skilled in a certain platform or area. So definitely give it a go. Let's see. Still got some time for some questions. If anyone else has any, feel free to drop them in. And there's one here about error management, Dave. So the question is, how long does error management take? But maybe you can speak also about the process of error management with Celigo.
That's great. So yeah, so I mean, what Forrester found doing it, in hours, that it takes a technical resource on average 5 hours to resolve a data error. Because in a custom situation, you get an error code. Code is, and actually everyone out there knows error codes, because when you go to a website that's not working, what do you see? 404. Okay, yes, that is an example of an error code, right? System down. And that's actually when a SaaS system's down, when a SaaS system's down, you don't get a 404. So the average person doesn't know what that means. But there's going to be some code, and every SaaS application has their lists of error codes. And if you are, certainly Salesforce admins are very comfortable with all the likely know a lot of the Salesforce error codes. So that's one of your endpoints, and you're connecting to NetSuite. Your NetSuite admin says, "Hey, we're having trouble with our integration," and they ask you probably know it, but again, there could be 50 or 40, 50, 60, however many SaaS applications that are part of your tech stack, and each one of them is going to have their own set. So first, you've got to figure out what that error is. Common errors are, like the example of a 404, except it's not a 404. API limits, right? That's a very common, right? You only have so many APIs to hit. Say you have 50. If I'm your, if we hit our 50 first, it stops. And if you don't know what the error code is, you don't know why it stopped. You've got to go in and figure it out. If you don't know the error code, and if you do know the error code, you still may or may not. Okay, rate limit. What do I do now? So, kind of the alternative. What's great? One of the things that we love about Celigo, one of the reasons we invested so hard in making error management easy, with Celigo, the average is 30 minutes. Because what we've done is we've used AI so that you don't get error code, you get a description. If it's a redundant error or a system error that can be retried, we retry it. So in the case of that rate point error, if you hit your 50th, you would get a message that would say rate point error, and it would say restart tomorrow. So at 12:01, when your error is restarted, our system would retry that for you. So you don't have to do anything, but you will know why your integration's down and what's going wrong. Now, so there's a bunch of different reasons, but the one that people really have to go in and fix is a data error. And that's, like I said before, so say one system says NY, it has to go to a system that says New York, either somebody typed something weird or something went wrong with the transformation in the middle, and it's got to get fixed. So normally that's where a developer really would have. So now they got to figure out why, then it was a data error. Now they got to figure out what the data error is. And there's, they would have to go into the log of one system to the other, look through the logs, identify what that means. In Celigo, it would identify that this is a data error. Here's the line. Here's the issue. A business user is going to know NY to New York. That was something really complex, right? You had a very complex, multi-nested, tiered, different decision tree thing. Okay, now you might have to bring the developer in to figure out that, because there's a data error. It'll tell you where the data error is, but if it's a transformation error, maybe something went wrong with this code, or maybe their code was wrong to begin with, or something, what they call it, I forgot what the term is, but there's basically sometimes something just didn't work, and you run it again and it does. Intermittent error. So it may come down to that, and that's when you have to bring the developer in. But really, that's the difference between traditional error management. That developer is called in every time. And there's three problems with that. One, that guy's expensive. Two, he or she could definitely be doing something more important. Three, this is not fun for them, and they can get another job at 25 with a 25% bump in salary if they don't have to mess around doing error management. So those are the three bad things that happen.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Dave. So looks like we have one more question left. If anyone does any more questions, feel free to drop them in. We can get around to them. But quite a simple question from Rick. How long is the trial period?
Great question. It is 30 days.
Nice and simple. There you go, Rick.
It is simple as that.
Great. Well, I think those are all the questions. So we'll see if any come in as we wrap up. But thank you very much for everyone attending today. I saw that the numbers were pretty high throughout the webinar. So Dave, I think your content was super engaging. So thank you very much to yourself and Saligo as well. Any final words before we sign off today?
No, it's just, first thanks Ben for having us, for hosting us and introducing me and handling all these questions. Thanks everyone out there for listening to me and you know, whatever integration solution you choose, I wish you the best of luck. But if you choose Saligo, you won't need as much luck.
Very nice. Cheers, everyone. See you on the next webinar.
Thanks.